What I want is mercy, not sacrifice. And isn't it always so crucial to connect love of God with love of neighbour? And in this brilliant poem of Isaiah, we see the necessity of doing that. We've got to connect our prayer and our social justice. There's a shift then in verse 21 from the nation to the city of Jerusalem itself. What a harlot she has become, the faithful city, Zion, that was all justice. The city's leaders are corrupt in the way that they use the legal system. They often bribe officials. They misuse the law so that God's law, instead of protecting the orphan and the widow, actually goes against them. This attack on the wealthy who misuse the law for their own ends is very common in the 8th century BC. There's great sadness here. In fact, we say it's a lament. And a lament is a beautiful way of speaking and praying in the Jewish scriptures, which is really thinking about the injustice and the people's sufferings and praying from their perspective to the God who knows it all. Now we move to chapter 2, verses 2 to 5. Zion, the focus of peace for all peoples. The second section, therefore. We have a new title, probably the original title, to the block chapters 2 to 12. The word that Isaiah saw in vision. Joseph Blenkinsop, in his Anchor Bible commentary, sees chapters 2 to 4 as a distinct unit, with the first Zion section forming an inclusion with a section on Zion in chapter 4. The Jerusalem Bible thinks both passages belong better with the messianic oracles of chapters 9 and 11. But Blenkinsop thinks that because they surround the judgment oracles about future destruction, we are to know that the time of destruction is over and peace will return and it will come back to us. And of course that means therefore that it's the work of a later editor than of the prophet Isaiah himself. And we actually read this passage on the first Sunday of Advent, in year 8. It's the first message we hear in Advent, therefore. It's the vision of messianic peace that we believe that Jesus brings to us. It's such a joyful, hopeful and exultant hymn. We see Jerusalem as the great mountain at the center of the earth, and all the nations of the world streaming towards it, eager to learn the ways of Yahweh. And all this ushers in a time of great peace. Swords will be turned into plowshares, spears into sickles. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, and there will be no more training for war, no more military preparations. It's superb imagery. It's a vision of peace, where weapons of war are turned into equipment for farmers to use. And it's inspired, hasn't it, this passage, so many people, right up to modern peace movements. This passage, interestingly, parallels Micah chapter 4, verses 1 to 5. And Blenkinsop argues that Isaiah is the original one because the ideas are very Isaian. Jerusalem, the place of learning God's law, and the forthcoming time of discernment and peace. It's a very beautiful passage. It might be appropriate at this moment to comment briefly on Isaiah chapter 4 verses 2 to 6 because it fits in very well here. It's also about the future Zion, but the focus here is on the city's inhabitants and the land that will sustain them. And it's clearly post-exilic, Isaiah 4 verses 2 to 6, as the people are called a branch or survivors, the remnants of Zion. Of course, therefore, the nation no longer is. These are the survivors. So it's post-exilic. The Lord will care for his people as he did care for them when they were in the wilderness, providing a smoking cloud by day and a light of flaming fire by night. The survivors are called holy because God is holy. The next section is now on the day of the Lord, chapter 2, verses 6 to 22. It's a long poem with a lot of editing in it, coming from a period when God abandons his people. Probably it's when he abandons the northern kingdom, or it's believed he does, in 722 BC. And it tells us why God has done this. The people have turned to divination, to foreign powers. They've relied on wealth, on military might, and of idols, instead of trusting in God. They lack humility, they're proud. 3 times there's the call to hide in caves and under rocks, taking refuge from the terror and majesty of God. And 3 times there is talk of the humbling of the pride and arrogance of humankind. These are a bit like a refrain. They may be editorial additions, trying to unify the whole passage, or they may be a poetic device to give a sense of immediacy and a sharper edge to what Isaiah is saying. Certainly, get into the caverns of the rocks, hide in the dust at the sight of the terror of God, at the brilliance of his majesty. It's very graphic. Like beetles scurrying away when you try to catch them. That's what we're going to be like with the day of the Lord. And the day of the Lord Sabaoth is an idea which first comes to light. The day of the Lord. It's an idea that is emerging this forthcoming day in the 8th century BC. We come across it first in the prophet Amos, where he says that the day of the Lord will become like a judgment day for humankind, when God will separate the good from the evil. Here in our passage, it's God's judgment of human pride, and it takes the form of a life-threatening storm, cutting its way from the north down to the south, from the cedars of Lebanon and the oaks of Bashan, out to sea, to the ships of Tarshish, right through the land of Samaria and Judea. It's a great poem. Now, the next passage, from chapter 3, verses 1 to 15, is about social and moral anarchy in the city itself, Jerusalem. The first 7 verses of this passage sketch the collapse of the whole superstructure and infrastructure of the city itself, and comes from the time of Isaiah. The military will be withdrawn, and the nobility, legal and religious authorities will all be swept away. Order is subverted. Roles are reversed. I will give them boys for princes. Traditional values, including family values, are abandoned. The people bully each other, neighbour and neighbour. A youth can insult his elder. A lout abuse a noble. No one wants to be a leader. Everyone tries to catch his brother in their father's house and say, "You have a cloak, so you can be our leader and rule this heap of ruins." Blenkinsop says that